Hey everyone, Epic Edge back again with another Pass Your Pull video, this time featuring Venti the Anemo Archon. So based on everything we've been told during the patch 1.4 livestream, both of our banners in the upcoming patch will be reruns, with Venti the first banner. Now, it has been a while since Venti was released as the very first event banner in Genshin Impact, so the question here is, how does he stack up with the latest content in the game, and is he still worth your hard-earned Primogems? Let's find out. So Venti's skill set is relatively straightforward. So first off, let's go talk about his auto attack. It is a standard 6-step bow attack pattern. And honestly, there's not much to talk about here. It's nothing like Ganyu's skills or, you're not really going to use this for Venti anyway. You want to use his elemental skills and his burst. Up next, we have Skyward Sonnet. This is Venti's elemental skill, and you can activate this in two ways. You can either press it and it will instantly summon a whirlwind that deals AoE anemo damage that launches enemies into the air, or you can hold it and create a larger whirlwind that more or less has the same effect, but with a few inclusions. Now, Venti will be able to ride this whirlwind up, and it's very similar to Albedo's own E-skill, which you can use as an elevator, and that enemies launched into the air will fall slowly, similar to Jean's charged attack. Now, as you'll see here, his Skyward Sonnet actually does some pretty good damage if you decide to build Venti for damage, with level 7 press damage dealing about 414%, and if you decide to hold it, it'll do about 570%. Now, depending on how you activate it, the cooldown will change. If you just pressed it, it will be on a 6-second cooldown, and if you held it, it will be on a 15-second cooldown. Next, we have Wind's Grand Ode. This is Venti's elemental burst, and if we had to describe this in 4 words, it would be Sucrus's burst on steroids. So the burst will suck in all enemies, grouping them up and dealing anemo damage over time. And just like Sucrus's burst, the skill will absorb the next element applied for continuous swirl damage of that element. Absorption occurs only once per use. The multipliers for the skill, unfortunately, aren't particularly high. We're looking at about 56.4% damage over time and an additional 28.2 elemental damage at talent level 7. But that's not why you want to use Venti, right? You're not looking for the damage. What we like about this skill here is that the duration is 8 seconds, which is crazy long for a crowd control skill, plus it has a relatively low cooldown of 15 seconds and a reasonable energy cost of 60. So combine all of that with the skill effects and you have one of the best support elemental bursts in the game, especially if you're on a 4-piece Viridescent set. More on that later. Now that the skills have been talked about, let's start talking about build options for Venti. Given how Venti's kit is rather straightforward, gearing him isn't very difficult as well. So when you're picking out gear for Venti, there are only 2 artifact sets that you should really consider. The most obvious build is a 4-piece Viridescent set. 4-piece because we want that 60% bonus swirl damage and the 40% elemental resistance reduction after using Venti's burst. This is still the best in slot for Venti so far, and unless we get new domains and new artifacts, this will continue to be the best in slot for Venti. Now, if for whatever reason you don't feel like farming for Viridescent sets, I think the next best option would be a 4-piece Noblesse set. The 4-piece effect of this set still plays well with Venti's burst by increasing the damage it deals by 20% and granting a 20% attack buff to your entire party for 12 seconds. This set also taps well into Venti's role as a super support. However, this setup is still less optimal than the 4-piece Viridescent set, and honestly I think you should only really use this as temporary gear, especially if you're able to get a few good pieces, as part of the AR rewards. Now, while you can use this as a temporary set, I still think you really do need to farm Viridescent sets, but of course that's entirely up to you. Now, as for the stats, you can go with several choices to fit your playstyle really, but if I was building Venti, I want his burst up all the time, so I would probably build him similar to Mona over here, with tons and tons of energy recharge, which is great since Venti actually gains energy recharge as you ascend him. Since I would build Venti similar to Mona, let's use Mona as a placeholder since I have no Venti, unfortunately. So let's pretend this is Venti, and that what I'm about to show you are Viridescent sets. So primarily you would want energy recharge on your sands, anemo damage, pretend it's anemo damage on your goblet, and as for the headpiece, this is where you can have a little bit of flexibility. If you have a lot of elemental mastery and energy recharge on your substats, I think you can easily go with crit rate over here. But if you're lacking in that department or your rolls rolled into crit rate, I think you can slap elemental mastery over here. Now, stat priority on the substats is pretty much the same. Energy recharge, elemental mastery, and just add a sprinkle of crit chance and crit damage, some HP here and there, and voila, you have a Venti. Now, if you want a baseline, I think Mona's stats should provide a good idea here. Now, my Mona here has about 112 elemental mastery, which translates to about 49.3 additional damage to swirls, about 50% crit rate, 100% crit damage, and 231 energy recharge. So you kind of want to have something like this, not exactly like this, but something like this. I think that would be a pretty good baseline for your Venti. Next, let's talk about Venti's weapon choices. This is the elegy for the end, the new 5-star bow coming in patch 1.4. Now, we all know that the weapon banner rates are pretty scuffed, but if you feel like taking a chance on it, this is easily the best weapon for Venti, with energy recharge as the secondary stat, and a loaded passive that gives 60 elemental mastery to the user, and some nice buffs to the party. You can easily tell that this was made for Venti. If you're looking for a more affordable option, I would highly recommend using the Stringless. It has decent base attack, but more importantly, it has Elemental Mastery as its secondary stat, and a passive that increases skill and burst damage by a ton. At R5, the damage increase hits over 40%, which is something that you would gladly take just to increase Venti's damage by a little bit. The other budget-friendly option I can recommend would be the Favonius Warbow. It has energy recharge as its secondary stat, and its passive generates a bunch of energy particles. So if your Venti has relatively high crit rate and a ton of energy recharge, the Favonius Warbow is an excellent choice if you want to self-sustain Venti and get his bursts up quickly. Last, we have the Windbloom Ode as our best pure free-to-play option. Everyone who plays through patch 1.4 will get this for free from one of the events. Now, this bow does grant us elemental mastery, but Venti doesn't particularly need the self-attack buff from the passive. I would say that this is pretty good if the buff was applied to the entire party, but for now, the Windbloom Ode is suboptimal and should only be your last resort, or only be used if you are very new to the game. Now, with all that said, on to the verdict. Pass or pull? Now, this one is easy. Venti is still a pull. Even after the release of some very powerful 5-star heroes, Venti still holds his place as a top tier 5-star. Now, I remember when Genshin Impact just launched and everyone was either re-rolling or spending like crazy for Venti simply because he was that good. And even after several months since his release, Venti continues to be that good. For those of you who are concerned about the emerging power creep in recent patches, you don't have to worry about Venti at all. Just looking at his skill set, we can easily say that he is more or less about 95% future-proof as a support unit. 95% simply because, MiHoYo might release a similar 5-star in the future, but even then, Venti's kit makes him the closest thing to future-proof as you can get right now. So overall, Venti's kit makes him very useful in so many places and can literally be partnered with any DPS in the game, which opens up an entire universe worth of team compositions to try. When we also consider the timing of his banner, you should have a few extra weeks to save up for new heroes in patch 1.5, even if you decide to use up a lot of resources for Venti. Now, all of these factors combined make Venti an absolute pull in my book. And what about you guys? Will you be pulling for Venti straight up, or are you planning to target a different 5-star in the future? There have been some interesting data mines over the last few days with the likes of Baizu and Cloud Retainer in human form. So, whichever route you plan to take, let's talk about it in the comments below. And that's gonna do it for this video. Please don't forget to leave a like and to subscribe to the channel if you found this helpful. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until the next video, stay epic.